Bring in retired Army General and former Director of the NSA, Keith Alexander. General, good to see you. Thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you, Maria. Glad to be here.
This is pretty extraordinary that there was actually a rule in place that agents were told do not look at social media posts when vetting of people coming into the United States. Can you explain this?
Well, you know that the program that we ran had tremendous scrutiny. The concern always is our U.S. person's civil liberties and privacy and how we protect that. But you bring up a great point, and that question is, how are we going to address social media as we go forward on this war on terrorism? We have the time now, and we should put in place all the tools and authorities our intelligence community and law enforcement needs to protect this country, and that includes social media. And I think we have to take it another step, Maria. I think we have to look at what we allow ISIS to do with social media to recruit people. We've got to take on both of these. And this is an important debate that our country should have now while we have the time.
Well,
we can't let this persist.
Yeah, I think this is a really important point that you make. I'm just wondering if it's a little too late. We know that Malik, the wife of the terrorism shooters in California, was posting on Facebook her love of jihad and that she wants to join the fight. And we missed it because our agents were told you can't look at social media because it's politically incorrect and, you know, it impacts civil liberties.
Right, and so that's an issue that has to be addressed. I think the program that we ran, you know, interestingly, it was overseen by the courts, by Congress, and by the administration. While it wasn't widely known to the American people, perhaps we should put out what we can and cannot do. Let's take this on now.
Yep.
We can't afford to have another set of people killed while we had the opportunity to stop it.
Yep.
This is going to be a tough debate.
I want to bring in former New York City Mayor Rudy Giuliani right here, who's joining me on set. Mr. Mayor, explain.
I can't. I do private background checks for companies, and we check social media to give them the background of a person they're hiring.
It's your easiest way to see what people are saying.
The New York City Police Department checks social media to keep track of track of terrorism.
When you were mayor?
Absolutely.
All the way back then.
All the way back then. When something is made public, and it isn't within the zone of privacy, when you've published it, I have a right to capture it. And these are statements that are being published. They're not private. They're not private communications. If you allow the world to see what you wrote, then the world can include the United States government, the City of New York, the State of New York, the District Attorney's Office, the U.S. Attorney's Office. And searching social media that is non-private is almost a common part of vetting any middle-level to high-level employee.
So to what do you attribute
I
this?
attribute it to the president's denial, living in denial that this was a war. All the time, since he's come into office, he's told us we're not at war with terrorism anymore, or Islamic terrorism. And here's the irony of that. Every single day he's been president, Islamic terrorism has been at war with us. But he hasn't been at war with them. So he has us in some kind of a not serious enough process to deal with the consequences of what we're doing. He's pretending this is like a bunch of crimes. It isn't. They are at war with us. Bin Laden declared war against us in '98. ISIS has declared war against us. It doesn't matter if we're at war against them. They're at war against us, and we should be using the measures to protect ourselves that you would use if you were at war. The president living in a state of denial is exceedingly dangerous, and now we're seeing the consequences of it.
And General, we know that that 40,000 K-1 fiancé visas were issued, 40,000. Many of them have gone to Asians. But do we need to go back and check all of the visas that were issued to enter this country in the last 5 years?
You know, I think it's reasonable to do that, and that's a tremendous burden on Homeland Security and the intelligence community. But I do think we need to go back and check and make sure, and we ought to do that. But the mayor brought up some good points that I'd just like to emphasize. You know, we are at war, and because we're at war, this requires a national strategy and an international strategy to go after terrorism. We don't have that. We've got to put that in place now. And we are taking this as a tactical engagement or as a crime, and it's a war. And that war requires a campaign plan of how we're going to defeat terrorism. And it includes everything that you brought out, Maria. It includes how we're going to handle social media. It also includes the tactics, the international coalition, and other elements of how we're going to defeat this threat.
Mayor Giuliani, what do you think about that? What should this new plan look like? Do you agree with the general?
Exactly what the general is saying. And, you know, the president had an opportunity yesterday when he went over the Pentagon, and the headline of the article is "No New Strategy." There is no strategy. And the horrible thing is that they have a strategy, but we don't.
They sure do.
We are at war. What that means is we should be pursuing them where they exist. We should be using our military for the purpose for which it was intended, to defend us, and we should have troops engaged in defeating ISIS and in defeating the other extremists who want to come here and kill us. When we were doing that in 2002, 2003, 2004, we were preventing these kinds of things. When they're hiding in their caves being shot at, they have a hard time using social media. When you give them the room to operate, they can operate very effectively.
Let me ask you, General Alexander, about the other issue, and that is privacy. Okay, I recognize that this is a completely different issue than being told you can't look at social media, because all of that stuff was public. So that we could have stopped Malik from coming into this country. That we could have done. But there's something else going on right now, and that is this refusal or reluctance on the part of technology companies to stop encrypting communication, to give information to lawmakers or regulators when, in fact, you know that there is bad stuff going on social media. What do you want to see from technology companies, and what's the answer here?
Well, I think we have to have a partnership with technology and governments, not just our government, but with the international community. You know, we cannot put it on the back of our technology to try to go it alone. Our government has got to help lead the way in this area. But our government cannot do it without the technology companies supporting. They are the ones that can help us break through this, and we have to do it. And from my perspective, we've got to get Europe on side in this case. What we're going to do with respect to encryption, that's a huge debate. What we're going to do to go after them on the internet, that's a huge debate. Both of those have to happen. And Europe right now is divided. What happened in France, in Paris, that was terrible. They see what's coming their way. Now is the time for us to act in this area.
Can you give the American people that? Can you tell the American people, though, look, yeah, you know, right now it's a moment in time, and, you know, your information, this data will be shared with government. I mean, is this a slippery slope?
Well, I think not if you do what we did. We had oversight by the courts, the administration, and Congress. And I would add in, you know, we had an ACLU member look at everything we did. Jeffrey Stone looked at this and said, you're meeting all the compliance. He'd add in a couple things. He wanted the data moved to the service providers, which is done. And he also talked about perhaps bringing in an independent group every year to look at it. Good, let's do those. But let's give law enforcement and the intelligence community the tools they need to help detect terrorist threats now. We can't wait on this stuff.
Yeah.
You know, we're at a critical point.
We sure are, yeah.